So it's now a little after 3:30. You can see that the sodium bromide is reluctantly dissolving. And this flask has generated a lot of solid. It's still a little bit higher than room temperature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cool that in an ice bath. You don't want to cool things like that in an ice bath until after you've already gotten them most of the way to room temperature. And I'm just going to cool that. And I'm going to turn on my vacuum. Get ready for this vacuum filtration. And we're just going to wet that filter paper, make sure it's covering all the holes, and then use the pipette that I was using for water earlier just to wet that down with a little bit of ice water to make sure the holes are well and truly covered. Scooch that a little over because we don't want to lose our solid around the outside edges of the filter paper. And that seems like it's a pretty good vacuum. And just a little more. So that should be a good tight seal. As I said, it takes a long time for that sodium bromide to dissolve, so that's why I wanted to set that up early while we're waiting for the rest of the reaction. And this ice bath should be ready by the time we need it. Once we're done, we're going to put that into a 10 ml beaker and nest it inside a 50 ml beaker like we usually do in order to store it in the desiccator. So I'm going to get a clean 10 milliliter beaker and tare it. First I'm going to put a label on so I get the tare weight with the label. Should write the label. And this is going to be, since I'm on page 48 in my notebook now, this is going to be DCL-10-48A. Which is the acetanilide. And we'll tape that label on. And then tare the beaker. Varying quite a bit. So that beaker has a tare weight of 9.261 grams. 9.261 grams. And we'll be able to just get the percent yield by difference. So that'll be set aside waiting. And that's now cold enough that it's ready to filter. And we're going to have to pour that in fairly slowly since it's such a large volume. You can see how kind of light the crystals are as it they're almost like plates, kind of flat crystals. And there's a lot of it. And we'll just use some of that ice water from the bath. Try to get the rest of those crystals to come out. And that'll also wash the crystals that are already collected. So I'm just using 3 pipette squirts for a couple of washes. It's about 1 milliliter per squirt. Flushed out my Erlenmeyer twice. And now I'm just going to run this down the side. Just to rinse any excess base. Since this next reaction is being run in acetic acid, we really don't want any excess base in our acetanilide. So about 5 more squirts worth to get that filter cake washed. It can be clean. That one we will need to clean with soap. So I'll let air come through that a little bit, and then we'll transfer that to a beaker and put that in the desiccator. At which point I'll pause again, stop the recording while it dries in the desiccator, so we can move on to the second step. Grab a spatula out. We'll need a spatula to transfer that into the beaker. Might have splashed a little water. I want to put that in the desiccator. Not really happy about dissolving that sodium bromide. It's water soluble, but there's not much water in there. Just a little bit of 95% ethanol. For the recrystallization of the product of the bromination reaction, we're going to need 50% ethanol. So we need to make up some 50% ethanol. Not sure how much we'll need. So I was just going to make up about 50 milliliters. So that's ready to go when we need it as well. Probably won't need 50, but ethanol's cheap. So just 25 mils of ethanol. 25 milliliters of DI water. And then we'll pour that into a 100 ml beaker. Mix it thoroughly. No need to clean that. Just let that dry. And we'll cover that beaker with a watch glass. Set that aside. So we got a little bit of 95% ethanol and we got some 50% ethanol. And at this point I think that's enough running the air. Always break the vacuum first by pulling one end of the hose off slowly before you turn off the vacuum. Yank that off of there. And we'll be needing this hose again later for the second filtration, so I'll keep that. just want to transfer this as carefully as I can. And run around the edges. I'm not going to worry about the piece of filter paper. Remove that later after it's dry. So we want to make sure we get all that into the beaker. And you can see it's really kind of low density crystals. A little flat filter cake. Nice white solid. Even though the aniline was quite yellow, it generates a pretty clean product. .8 grams, or sorry, I think it's 1.58 or 1.6 grams or something theory. It's quite a bit of solid for this size funnel. So, be a little careful to transfer that without dumping it. We only need a gram of this for the next reaction, and then the rest of it we'll save, because we're going to run a GC mass spec on this product and see what it looked like. Make sure it was acetanilide and see how pure it was. Let's build a little bit, not too much. And actually the filter paper is staying stuck. So I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of solid in favor of leaving that filter paper behind so I don't have to pull it out later. Good enough. So a little bit of solid here we can. And I'm going to break that solid up. That'll help the residual water come out in the desiccator. Not really worried about collecting every last bit, because we made way more than we actually need for the next reaction. So there that is. Just sit that down in that 50 ml beaker so it doesn't fall over. And we'll get out a desiccator that has some nice blue desiccant, meaning that it's still dry. And we'll stick that in there and let that dry. So it is now 3:45, and I'm going to let that dry for about half an hour. So at 4:15, at 4:15 I'll come in and I'll grab that out. Meanwhile, I'll clean up, so I'll pause this again.